Well, here's a new project. New project for me, and then it's an old radio, probably a 30s vintage. I've never done one of these, or restored one of these before. Just got back from the thrift store with it. Let's see, I paid $60 for it. Really don't know if that's a good deal or bad, but yeah, I bought this from a thrift store that I'd gotten some really good deals from before, so I don't mind if it's a little bit more than it's worth. Originally they had a $150 price tag on it, so they came down from that. So it's at least third price of the original price. It's got something called Sentinel. I don't know what that is. It's in a little cardboard box. And there's an old what do they call those, dynamic speakers where they use a little electromagnet to drive the thing. Doesn't have a permanent magnet. So let me get this thing out of the car. Okay, this thing is made by Sentinel. You can read that. And there's our price. Needs recap, of course. Cabinet's in pretty rough shape, but seems to be all there. It's got some missing pieces here. Veneer. I guess I'll have to have that redone or jump on YouTube and figure out how to fix that. And there's the chassis. Looks like everything's there. Looks like it's got some mold or mildew or something that's built up here over the years. There's a number of these moving things, so it's been moved around a bit. But there's the model number. There we go. Yeah, here's the 1939 vintage Sentinel radio out of the cabinet. The chassis. Looks, the dial and everything looks in really good shape. I've already pulled the tubes out and labeled all the sockets in the tubes, so I'll know where they go back. This looks all in decent shape too. And underneath, I've gone through and all of those old green paper wax capacitors I've taken note of and made a list, and there's one kind of brown electrolytic right there, and I've got them all on order to go ahead and completely recap this thing, at least with at least the paper caps. Paper wax caps I'll redo. I think the ceramics will probably be okay. I'll start there, replace all those, and then maybe slowly power it up, see what happens. Well, the recap process has started on this old 39 Sentinel tube radio. See a bunch of orange drop caps down in there. This one that's buried, it was a real bear to get installed. It's hard to reach down in there with a soldering iron to get it soldered in, but got it. So I got about half the radio done. This other half, you can see, still has a lot of the old green paper capacitors in there yet, so that's what's left to do. Plus some of these caps over here that go across the power, which I've got special ones for that. There's the old wax guys. I measured those after taking them out. They're all off by at least 50%, some even more. And here's some of the electrolytics and orange drops that I yet to put in. So that's where we are so far. I also deoxit coated all the contacts on that switch, and used some electronics lube on the dial and the tuning capacitor to kind of get it moving freely, so it's going well. So that's where we are so far.
Commercial real estate. That's commercial stuff. That's
well, I've got the
real estate.
Sentinel radio almost completely recapped. There's one capacitor I need to replace. I didn't order enough of them, so I'll have to order another one to replace that one. But I plugged it in through the isolation transformer and onto the variac, and then through the dim bulb tester. And my dim bulb is kind of bright, so I think I need to get a higher wattage in there. It looks like it's limiting the voltage down to about 85 volts or so. So it's a little light, but I'll up that. But the radio's working, as you can hear.
Children's education.
Of course, you have to have the speaker plugged in when you fire this up, because the electrodynamic coil down there is actually part of the power supply. So I've got that plugged in the back here. And I don't have the antenna hooked up. I'm just holding on to the wire here to see. When I let go of it, it kind of goes silent again. So I'm part of the antenna. But it's playing. Everything seems to be working. So I'm happy. Yeah, man, I lucked out. I think all I did is replace the caps. Kind of tested the tubes a little bit. I just have a voltmeter, so I checked for shorts. Didn't find any, and all of the heaters had continuity, so I plugged them back in. Put power to it, and away we go. Seems to be working. So I'll put it back in the cabinet, hook it up to the big loop antenna that came with it, and see how it works. And I'll play it for a while, and then pull it all back out and start restoring the cabinet. But yay, the radio works after it's probably been many decades since it's been played, but it's working again.
The real estate market in the U.S. come back up from this.
Yeah, I got the old radio working here. You see it bringing in a station.
Chinese fleet with about 1,200 Navy
when I was playing this last night, I noticed I could only get two stations. One was this kind of Chinese-based station, and another one was a Spanish kind of mariachi music type of station. And I've got both those tuned in here now on this. There's the mariachi music.
Impact exercises.
And there's the news from China. So I was a little confused. I was wondering why. I was only getting these kind of strange foreign stations. I thought maybe, I was hearing shortwave instead of the standard broadcast band. Then eventually that Chinese station signed off, and I found out it was a local rebroadcast of Chinese programming from a local Northern Virginia radio station. So by that time it was night, and I was starting to pick up broadcast AM radio stations from New York City, upstate New York, even Canada. So I found out that it was on the AM broadcast band, but I couldn't get any local stations except for that one Chinese station. So eventually I went out to my car and put it on the AM radio band and tried to find a station, and there was nothing except for that one weak Spanish station. So I didn't realize this, but apparently AM broadcasting is pretty much gone. There's hardly any stations out there, at least in the Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. So I guess we went online and discovered that a lot of other people, I guess, knew about this, and they're starting to buy local AM, low power transmitters, to play music off of Pandora or whatever into their old antique radios So I ordered one of those myself, and I'll go ahead and put it together. It's a little kit for him, and set up something to broadcast to this guy. But it's working fine. There's this interesting thing here, these little push buttons. It wasn't when I got this, I wasn't sure what those were for, but apparently these are just individual little tank circuits, tuning circuits. You can push the button, set those up to tune in whatever station you want to. And you got 6 of them. And you can see they're not changing, when you hit those, it's not changing the tuning capacitor. It's actually individual little tuners. And right here is where you, with this little lever, goes up and changes this thing, which goes into a switch in the underneath there and changes the tuning. So there's the loop antenna, which is that big box over there, that Sentinel thing. Then you can go to the external antenna, medium wave, and short wave. Now, last night I was tuning in on the short wave, trying to find something, and I found a station that was in Spanish, which I don't speak Spanish, but I was listening and heard them talking about Havana and Cuba several times. So I think it may have been a Cuban shortwave station. I never found anything on this medium wave. I don't even know if that's used anymore. And then just a few stations. I started getting skips last night from states away, but very few AM radio broadcast stations. So that's it. I guess FM killed AM, and now the internet is killing FM. So I don't know how much longer we're going to have radio broadcasting. But anyway, the old radio's working. And I'll go ahead and put it back in the cabinet here pretty soon, and hear what it sounds like then. I did. This thing plays really loud.
The opportunities for friendly relations, and the Chinese fleet arrives in Hawaii to take part in.
Definitely fill a room with sound, and the tone control works well. There's treble and bass. So all of it's all working very well.
All of that coming up in the next 60 minutes. It's 1.5 minutes past the hour.
So this thing actually has two push-pull stages here. There's the final output pair, and then here's the another push-pull pair that drives these two. So it's got plenty of volume. It'll blast you out.
A decision on the case on July the 12th. The Philippine government unilaterally filed the case in 2013, despite an agreement reached with China.
I don't know how many watts of power that is, but it certainly pushes that old speaker. So that's it so far. I'm happy, and I'll be happier when I can get some kind of good reception on this thing and hear what it really sounds like. Here's one more safety warning I want to point out on some of these old radios. Now I'm playing this through an isolation transformer, but I've got my voltmeter hooked up to onto the ground lug of the isolation transformer, which does go back to the local earth ground. And then on the other side I've got tied to the chassis of the radio, which is playing. And you can see on the chassis it's got 76, 77 volts AC. So when these things are on or even just plugged in, you don't want to reach around and touch the chassis unless you do have it plugged into an isolation transformer, because you can get a shock. I'll show you that even when you turn it off, the voltage actually jumps up. Now it's about 93 volts AC. So, and it's not until you turn off the isolation transformer, which I'll do, the voltage drops down to a volt, less than a volt. So just even turned off, just plugged in, these things have dangerous voltages on the chassis. So if you're working on it outside of the cabinet, you know, make sure you use an isolation transformer, and when it's plugged into the wall in the cabinet, you know, don't reach around and touch the metal chassis because you can get a shock. I received that one capacitor that I was missing on the recap job and just soldered it in. This little 3.3 nanofarad cap right there on the output tubes. So the whole radio has been completely recapped, at least all the old green paper wax capacitors and the electrolytics. Now down here on the electrolytic can, I just left the can physically there. You know, that's that big thing out here that sticks out the top of the chassis. And just cut all the wires off and relocated the circuitry right up here. So there's the two electrolytics that replaced what was in the can. And over here on the volume and tone controls, there was some little capacitors that were actually riveted to the chassis. So I didn't take those off. I just kind of cut the leads and then replaced them with little orange drops right here. I had to remove these controls to be able to get to those. And while I was at it, I went in and deoxed it, treated both of them so that they freed up. There was one capacitor here that's right across the AC, so I put one of these safety caps in. I guess those are designed to go across AC. So that's it on the underside. About to put this back in the cabinet, so this is probably the last opportunity to see what that looks like underneath there. Now on top here, let me set this down. Oh, ouch, ouch. Got my light on my foot. So there's the tube complement. Thought I'd just go through this real quick. So the signal comes in, and it goes to this little oscillator tube and mixer tube, and then it goes through the one of the IF cans here over to the IF amplifier, 6SK7. That guy is a 6K8. And it goes off to through the IF can again to the detector tube right there, which is a 6H6, I believe, and then there's the automatic volume control right next to it, 6C5. Then goes through a pair of tubes here. One of them is kind of an audio amplifier, 6SF5, and it's got a matching 6SF5 there as the phase inverter to start feeding the push-pull pairs, which are right here. The first set are 6C5s, and the output push-pull pair are 6K6Gs. So that's it. I guess 11 tubes total. And time to turn it on one more time to make sure that new capacitor is working, and then I'll put it back in the cabinet. Well, the electronics are up and running, and I've mounted them back in the cabinet for now. The cabinet needs a lot of work, but that'll be part 2, I guess, of the restoration. So I'll do a whole another video series on that. But for now, I'm just listening to it, and I've actually made a little AM radio broadcasting station, which is sitting right there right now, and it's got a little 6-foot antenna that goes up the wall, and it's being fed from laptop, Pandora playing. But I can play old time radio stations. I found a website that has those, so I can pretend like it's 1939 again, and sit in the living room here, which is, I think, a proper place for this radio, because that's, I assume, where people would put them back in the 30s and 40s. And this thing has all kinds of volume. I mean, you can turn it up way too loud to even hear, so it definitely fills the whole room and maybe in the whole floor with sound. Pretty impressive amplification capability. So I guess that's it for now. This will end the video, and stay tuned sometime in the future for the cabinet restoration. But that's it for the old 1939 Sentinel radio.